Today we are recapping the Cliff Keen Las Vegas Invitation. The field was a little smaller than usual, with no ACC schools and a few D1 programs not making the trip they usually do. But with that being said, the tournament certainly did not disappoint. This is one of my favorite in-season college tournaments, and it's fun seeing such high-level wrestling early on in the season. The talent pool is normally high, and it's fun seeing so many different conferences represented and competing against each other. It is fun seeing red shirts compete at Midlands and Scuffle in order to see the future of the sport compete, and seeing what other teams have in the reserve. But it was also interesting seeing a tournament solely focused on the single representative each team is going to bring, sort of like the end of the year with conferences and nationals. Of course, most, if not all, of these lineups are not finalized for March, but that goes without saying. But before we get into my recap of Cliff Keen, hi everyone, my name is Tanner, and I'm just a wrestler that wants to watch and make videos about D1 college wrestling. If you end up liking this video, please consider giving this video a like and hitting that subscribe button. I make dual lineup breakdowns along with big tournament recaps like this video, so please enjoy. I've ultimately decided to go in weight class order with topics I want to talk about. I find that to be the best way to go through everything. After I run through each weight class, I plan to talk about a few teams that I'm excited for example, some teams that might have overperformed, or maybe a few teams that might have underperformed or just didn't live up to their potential. Similar to the NCAA finals, they tried to go with the best match last, so they started at 157 and for very good reasons. The champion at 157 was Ryan Deacon, who was a multiple-time CKLV champ at this point, and he looked unstoppable on his way to his title. That is not to discredit runner-up at the weight class Quincy Monday of Princeton. I talked about Monday in my Iowa video, and he has yet to really disappoint me. He is a fun wrestler to watch for sure, and he just likes to put up points. His match against Rob from Nebraska started to become a little close near the end, but Monday controlled the majority of the match. It is unfortunate that Coleman and Rob both medical forfeited out after the semifinal loss. Rob did, however, tweak something during his match, and Coleman has not looked himself all year. Other key notes at the weight were Jacob Wright of Wyoming, who placed third over Luan of Michigan, which is a big accomplishment for the Wyoming Cowboy. There was also Dejan Castro of the Citadel that gave Rob a match in the quarterfinals, but then would drop a close one to Cerniglia of Navy in order to place. Cerniglia also looked good throughout this tournament, and I have no worry that Castro will definitely be a huge threat in the SoCon, and he looked pretty well for a lower-seeded wrestler. 165 saw the returning national champ Shane Griffiths versus multiple-time All-American Evan Wick. They both had a few close matches on their way to the finals, but they left no doubt that they are the top two contenders at 165. Wick has easily worked his way back into the title conversation, with his win over Griffiths being a 6-2 decision. Other key notes are Cam Amin taking 5th, who looked pretty good against Wick in the semifinals. He seems like he has made some off-season improvements, but still not super offensive just yet. It was cool to see Division II wrestler Matthew McCollum of Nebraska Kearney make his way into the quarterfinals, but would eventually lose to Wick and then lose his blood round match. Then of course there was Carson Karchula of Ohio State, who seems like he's already at an All-American level. Karchula was a point away from beating Griffiths in the semifinals and actually took down the returning national champ early on in the match, so with just a few adjustments I could see him becoming a very high All-American this March. 174 saw eventual champ Mikey Labriola of Nebraska take out Ethan Smith of Ohio State, who's a weight class up from last year. This was a fun sudden victory match with a lot of scoring and fun wrestling elements throughout. Labriola looked great as ever throughout the tournament, and so did Ethan Smith, but he's still looking for that higher ranked win at his new weight class 174. Other key wrestlers to note are Adam Kemp, who was the 13th seed for Cal Poly, taking out Foka of Cornell in the round of 16, and Fisher of Northwestern in the quarters. Kemp would eventually medical forfeit out after his semifinal loss to Smith, which is unfortunate, but he is definitely a great addition for Cal Poly and a fantastic hand fighter. His Fisher match in the quarterfinals would be a little boring, which is a little odd because Fisher is slowly becoming one of my favorite wrestlers to watch because he's so offensive at the weight class. But with that said, the last 20 seconds of the match definitely were exciting, but unfortunately was in sudden victory rideouts. Finally, there was Chris Foka of Cornell, who was a very high wrestler coming into this season, but unfortunately dropped an early match to Kemp in the round of 16, but he would end up wrestling all the way back and beating several good opponents to place third, so that is a very good pickup for Foka. 184 saw the return of Caleb Romero of Ohio State in his first start of the season, and it might have been his best tournament of his college career, coming in as the 5 seed and winning the bracket over Taylor Venz of Nebraska in the finals. They were both fun to watch all tournament, but Romero's double leg would eventually get the best of Venz in the finals. I thought Samuelson of Wyoming looked alright throughout, maybe a little underproductive. I was a little more impressed with Cornell's low, and it is exciting to see Cornell compete again at a high level along with Princeton and all the other Ivy League schools. Of course, there was no Trox of Cal Poly, as he was a late scratch, but I would have loved to see him against Romero and Venz for the returning All-American, especially with him up a weight class. 197 pounds had some awesome matches and saw some gains from a few wrestlers, especially our two finalists Buchanan of Wyoming and Eric Schultz of Nebraska. It was fun to see Schultz sort of return to his former form after unfortunately dropping a few matches and exiting early out of Nationals last season. However, Buchanan showed that he is ready to make the jump up the All-American ladder past his previous 8th place finish last year. Other key matches and wrestlers were Hoffman vs. Sloan, which was an awesome round of 16 match. Sloan is looking a little off from his freshman year, which is unfortunate that he can't return to that magic he had his freshman year, and he would eventually medical forfeit out of this tournament, and Hoffman lose to very promising Princeton freshman Stout, who was a Pennsylvania state champ, so Hoffman also did not place at this tournament. The returning All-American Woodley from Oklahoma would have a small underperformance, but would end up taking 4th after losing a wild match to Purdue's Pinola, who dropped an early match himself and become a Conti hero like Foca, and wrestled all the way back to take 3rd, which was great for Pinola and the Boilermakers of Purdue. Heavyweight totally fell apart, and the leader behind that collapse was the one and only Gary Traub of Oregon State, former transfer from Ohio State. He would end up outplacing Ohio State's current starter Orndorff, who took 4th, with Traub taking 1st. Traub had 3 back-to-back-to-back overtime wins, truly cementing his name as Gas Tank Gary. After his quarterfinal win over Andrews of Wyoming, I actually typed in my notes that he could slip into All-American status this year, and then after his Lance win in the semifinals, I can confirm that I want to place my prediction. I don't want to take anything away from Traub, but he did get tech-falled this season by Kirk Fleet of Penn State early on in the year, so heavyweight is definitely still top-heavy with people like Paris and Stevenson who did not compete here, but is definitely a very deep weight class considering Traub was a 10 seed coming in here. He would eventually win by an injury default over Slavatsky of Harvard, who also had a great day, beating 197 bump-up Davison of Northwestern, who's having a great season himself up at heavyweight. Previously mentioned, 1 seed Tate Orndorff would also lose to Lance of Nebraska, who would take 3rd at the weight class, showing that Lance is also a very improved Cornhusker. Moving all the way back down to 125, we find our champ Patrick Gloria of Princeton. He would have a few close matches on his way to the finals, but I chalked that up to being a little bit of weight issues because he was lights out in the finals against Schroeder of Purdue. He might not have had the deepest field, but he left no doubt that he was either the 2nd or 3rd best guy at this weight class nationally, and he should either be a 3rd place or national finalist at this weight class depending on if Nick Suriano goes 125 or 133, in my opinion. I was also really impressed with 3rd place finisher Kaler from Oregon State, who had a wild match against Schroeder of Purdue in the semifinals that he would eventually lose, but he would also beat Heinzelman the round before in the quarterfinals. He would bounce back from his semifinal loss to Schroeder, where he would beat a very tough medley of Michigan 7-2, which is very impressive for 3rd place. I'm excited to see Kaler at this weight class, as he has looked very good all year so far. It was unfortunate to see Mancino of Columbia and Heinzelman of Ohio State both forfeit out at the beginning of day 2, which resulted in them both not placing, and leaving some possible good matchups up in the air, but it let some other individuals place at a very impressive tournament, so that was good to see. I also wanted to mention one other down note was Greg Diakomahalis going 0-2 for Cornell. It seems like he might need another year of development before he's truly productive for the Big Red, but he was a very high recruit in his class, so I have no doubt he will bounce back from this. 133 was probably the most shallow weight, with 2 seed Rich medical forfeiting out early in session 2, which is a little annoying as a fan, but as a wrestler I totally understand it. But this also led way for 7 seed Utah Valley's Drury, who seems to be more impressive than predicted this year. Drury would look very impressive on his way to 3rd place after only losing to Ragusan in the semifinals, and then being a very impressive Turner of Oregon State, and Turner himself looked very impressive all tournament as well. Then there is our champion Dylan Ragusan of Michigan, who looked lights out up a weight class, beating a returning All-American Cannon of Northwestern in the finals. I'm really excited to see Ragusan and Cannon move through the rankings this season, but Ragusan is simply fun to watch, and he just puts up points. The final wrestler I want to talk about at 133 was Cotoran Navy, who got some big wins under his name this weekend, and totally busted the bracket. He's another fun wrestler to watch, and his only bad match was against Buzzsaw Ragusan, but as we said, Ragusan would eventually go on to win the weight. The last thing to mention is the elephant in the room, that Vito Ruja did not come to this tournament, and instead Cornell threw out La Jolla. I really wanted to see Vito at this weight class, but hopefully it isn't a big health issue and it's just something small or rest or something along those lines, because I'm really excited to see Vito at this weight class this year. 141 might have had the best match of the night, in my opinion, with Carlson of South Dakota State going up against Andrew Alirez of Northern Colorado, and it's a little weird to say that this was the best matchup of the night considering Sasso and Yanni followed it. However, Carlson proved to everyone this weekend that he deserved to be an All-American last year for the Jackrabbits of South Dakota. He would beat Phileas in the semifinals of Purdue, who was one of my high come-ups of this year, and then would beat Aliras in the finals, but Aliras also looked great this entire tournament. Aliras looked like he was having so much fun and is way more offensive at 141 than he was at 149 just a couple seasons ago, even in his low-scoring semifinals match against Chad Red, which was a great 3-1 decision for Aliras. In my opinion, from Chad Red's small sample size this year though, he seems to be having scoring issues. I'm not sure if he's just working on his defense or if people are just stopping his scores because he's so highly scouted, but at this point it's just becoming habit to question Chad Red early season losses, so I have no doubt that he'll become an All-American this year, considering he normally takes some weird losses early on in the year. The last wrestler I wanted to mention was Cole Mann of Michigan, that finally had some success at the weight, placing 4th, losing to Chad Red for 3rd, and beating several good opponents on his way to the Conti Finals. Finally wrapping up the weight-by-weight breakdown, we come to 149, which was crazy from start to finish. The quarterfinals saw amazing matchups like Sasso vs. Mitch Moore. Ridge Lovett also shows that he's made major improvements this offseason, beating returning All-American Jaden Abbas of Stanford. The semifinals of this weight class were also thrilling and should have just been called funky because Lovett vs. Yanni and Sasso vs. Yaya were incredible matches to watch. For a split second, I really thought Ridge Lovett was going to get the win over Yanni, but Yanni did what Yanni does. Sasso vs. Yaya was also very tight and very competitive from start to finish. And then we get to our final, which was very anticipated, Yanni vs. Sammy Sasso, which would eventually have Yanni dominating over Sasso in a very riding and technical match, and it was really weird to see Sasso get rode out for a significant amount of time by Yanni. Naturally, 149 might not be as top-heavy as 141, but the weight is certainly deep and full of very, very fun wrestlers to watch. Overall, all the finals were very fun to watch, even heavyweight before the injury default. I wish the best for Savatsky and Harvard, and especially Savatsky's knee. I was honestly really impressed with Nebraska, which continues to show their success at this tournament. They finished with 125 points, with one champion coming in Labriola and 8 placers. They didn't enter a 133, and Reno was a backup, so Cronin could have really put them over the top in points. I want to keep this team on my radar, especially as they go through Big Ten schedule, but they'll continue to be exciting like they have been in years past. I was also really impressed with the Pac-12 teams Oregon State and Cal Poly. Both had champs and several placers, not pushing for a team title or anything, but they definitely have made some huge improvements, and it's cool to see transfers and recruits that they have gotten really paying off. Willits at 141 I especially wanted to mention. Even though he only took 5th, he's looked very impressive all year, and his top game looks to be very rough. And then I also mentioned Kaler for Oregon State, who missed the finals by a very late takedown against Schroeder. Ohio State, Northwestern, and Purdue all look good, but they all had their bad moments. Like D'Amelio almost beating Chad Red, but then dropping a Conte semi-match, which resulted in him not placing, or Ferrante of Northwestern being the 8th seed and getting majored by Malcolm of Nebraska Kearney, which is a Division II school. And Purdue got better as the tournament got longer, but they definitely had some early round matches that they definitely should have lost, and a result of them having to wrestle very long Conti matches. Navy also had a few wrestlers not placed that I thought should have, like Key at 184, who unfortunately had some bad Conti results, which ended in him not placing. And then there was also Suniga, who took 8th, who looked good some matches and then a little weird other matches, but overall he's definitely looked like he's made some improvements. And then there was the standout Codurant, who was a huge bracket buster at 133 pounds, and then there was also their 125 who placed, which was Allen. Cornell's lineup looked alright. Of course they were missing Vito Arujau, but I expect them to still be competitive in the EIWA, but I don't think they'll be pushing for any national titles this year just yet. The final team I wanted to talk about was a little bit of an underperformer in my books, which was Wyoming. Wyoming had the most wrestlers entering to day 2, but they did not do as well as projected. They had a few wrestlers not placed that I really thought would overperform, or wrestlers that just really underperformed and didn't place. I don't want to disrespect Buchanan, who looked lights out on his way to a title, but there were people like Greenwood at 133 that I thought would have better results, especially after being an All-American last weekend. There was also Wright at 157, who dropped an early match, but would wrestle all the way back to take 3rd, so I don't want to discredit him, but there was definitely some big underperformances for Wyoming. I have no doubt that they might bounce back, and regardless of anything that I said with these teams, it is very early in the season, so I have no doubt that a lot of them can bounce back and do very well in their conference season coming up here in the second half. Well everybody, those are my overall thoughts about CKLV. I couldn't talk about everybody or every little match unfortunately, or this video would be way too long, or it would take me till next year's CKLV to get out, and I don't think any of you really want that. But if I missed anything you guys wanted me to talk about, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. And if you want me to talk about one of your favorite teams, also feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And why don't you hit that like and subscribe button to grow the sport of wrestling and to grow my channel, of course. One last thing, I wanted to give a channel update. My next video might be a Penn State lineup breakdown or some other dual meet, breaking news story or something along those lines. But overall, I also wanted to apologize for the audio issues from my last video. And thank you all for the support you've given me so far. It's really awesome to see everyone really like these videos so far, and I hope to get a lot more out to you. So I wish everyone a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.